So yeah, let's cover the big elephant in the room: European federalization. That's the big elephant right now. They're screaming and shouting as hard as they fucking can that Europe needs to federalize. Europe needs to federalize. We need to create the EU army. We need to do this. We need to. They're already talking about merging all the foreign ministries into one singular bureaucracy. So you got these wheels moving, which can they pull it off? Yes. In the limited time frame that they have, they could pull it off. Now, as I was telling you guys the other day, the fact that the euro is literally hinged off of one executive order from collapsing is a big fucking deal. And if the EU federalizes, it literally prevents the euro from ever collapsing, technically speaking. Now, will it be worth anything? Yeah, that's for everybody to kind of talk about and judge on their own. But that's kind of where we're at right now. In the case of the EU federalizing and creating the EU army and shit like that, well, as Mitch mentioned earlier, they're talking about an $800 billion military investment. And I'm like, okay, where are you going to get the cash? Where are you going to get it? Which I know where they're going to get it, by the way. I know for a fact where they're going to get it, and that's why they're freaking out so hard about Canada. Oh yeah, Canada. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Canada is the Crown's piggy bank. It is literally the rainy day fund, and pretty soon. I have a good feeling that rainy day fund's going to get opened up.
How do you suspect they're going to do that? Because I assume Canada is not just going to let itself be, like,
oh, no.
stripped of all its worth.
Oh, no, this will result in a civil war in Canada. It will be the, Saskatchewan. Now, mind you, Alberta is already in the process of sending delegates to Washington, D.C.
True.
And Saskatchewan will probably follow very soon after that. Now, Manitoba is compromised. That's fine. If Manitoba wants to die on the grapevine, they can die on the grapevine. I don't care. But, Alberta's already making the first moves. So there is a high likelihood that Alberta is basically going to petition the United States like, hey, we want to join you. And the Canadian government's going to freak the fuck out. They're going to try to crack down on Alberta's government as hard as they can. And then it's going to proceed to open hostilities between Alberta and Ottawa or Ontario. So that's what I think it results in, because the British, at this point in time, Brexit, they successfully killed Brexit. I don't see Brexit actually being able to happen. Unfortunately, what we've now found out about Farage and reform, the only person, and this is the thing, there's only one man in the UK that can stop all of this. There's only one.
Who?
And, well, he just happens to be now a simple farmer. But he's a former race car driver known as Jeremy Clarkson.
Are you going to have him punch Piers Morgan in the mouth again?
No, what I want to see is Clarkson run for prime minister. I want to see Clarkson actually jump into the political game, because unfortunately at this point in time he's being called to duty. Like there's no, I get to, kind of just skimp out on this and I kind of just get to, ride out the storm. No, he's being called at this point in time. And there's nothing he can do but just heed that calling. Because if he doesn't, the UK, again, Brexit fails, and then the UK dies with the EU. Because unfortunately at this point in time, I'm convinced the EU is going to declare war on the United States.
Yeah, it's not going to end well for them.
Oh, it won't be.
Are you talking military war or basically economic war?
both. It'll start as an economic war. Oops, I put my high vis on backwards. Whatever. But it'll start off as an economic war, and then it will move into a full kinetic conflict later down the line once they've had time to militarize.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you. Okay, this is something similar to what was in that video I sent you from Mr. Z. He was saying something similar to that about how later on down the line, America and Europe would become adversaries. But
so basically, what you're saying is that me and Mr. Z are on the same wavelength. Got it.
yeah, maybe a few hertz off, but similar enough. Your wavelengths ain't quite synced up, but they close. But here's my question: what do you reckon is the time frame on all this shit, and how would that affect internal politics here in America? Because there's still quite a few European lovers within our country and within our government and within our military.
Well, so that's the thing is that the build-up for them to take military action will take at least 20 years. They don't have the stockpiles. They don't have the equipment. They have to standardize everything. And that's the whole point of the EU military is that they standardize everything. Now, the problem is that they have to industrialize for it. And that's their key thing is that they need the industrial base. So we're talking 20 years from now. Now, then the question becomes, are they able to survive the oncoming storm that is the disaster cycle?
Yeah, the solar system shake and bake is what I call it.
I do like that, the shake and bake.
Well, I mean, think about it. The magnetic pole reversal is going to shake the Earth, and then the solar storm, then the sun cooking off is going to bake everything. So, shake and bake.
Oh, it makes sense.
From henceforth, we will call the disaster cycle the solar system shake and bake.
Yes.
Anyway, Dale, go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, like, how would an actual hot war even break it? Like, who would declare war on who and over what? Because there's kind of a giant ocean in between the U.S. and Europe.
It's going to be a replay of the War of 1812. It's going to be over Canada. Because Canada is a vital resource for the Europeans.
But then, like, them and what navy? Because, like, they have to cross the ocean, and it's not like they have, like... It's not like, there are, like, 2 aircraft carriers in all of Europe?
Yeah, again, I said 20 years, bud. You can do
a lot of ships can be built in 2 decades.
What the fuck is
this? And this also ties into something else too. The American-Russian alliance, if that comes to pass, then we would beat the Russians.
Hold on, Doc, I love you, but if you ever do that while we're recording ever again, I will stab you. Anyway, Stoner, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we would basically need the Russians to be a check on the Europeans land-wise.
Well, here's the thing: is that the Europeans might be stupid to believe that they can fight on 2 fronts. They might be stupid enough to believe it. And that's the thing is that's what's so important about the current situation. Like, look at what's going on with Starlink. We have a huge advantage right now because of Starlink, and the Europeans are right now. What's it called? Eurosat is what they're calling it, or something like that. They need to get stuff in the air, but here's the problem: how are they going to get it in the air? Well, if you don't know, the only nation in Europe capable of putting shit in the air
is Russia.
Like that? No, it's not Russia. It's France.
Right.
Yeah,
French
the
Guiana.
ESA, the ESA, European Space Agency.
Yeah. And their primary launch facility is on this side of the globe, down there in French Guiana, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Why did they put
Ooh,
it
that's
in?
within each
Why did they
striking
put it in
distance.
Guyana? Like, wouldn't it have been much easier just to have it in France, a much more developed place than Guyana?
Well, no, the problem is the launch conditions.
Uh-huh. And also there are
Because
certain parts of, and then also there's also certain parts of the Earth that are optimal for launching stuff into space, which is why we have Cape Canaveral down in Florida, because that's the optimum spot to launch stuff into space.
well,
They-
Starbase would challenge you on that, but
Yeah. Basically, the long-time rule has been as far as like, the closer your launch site is to the equator, the more assist you can get from the spin of the Earth as far as getting stuff into orbit. That's assuming you're doing like west to east, equatorial orbit there. That's usually the advantage of having a launch site down close to the equator.
yep.
And you
And
know what's funny? It's when Jules Verne wrote his book From the Earth to the Moon, he had his launching site in Florida.
Based.
well, that's where NASA was initially based out of. But the fact of the matter is that they've got a lot of preparation to make before they're even able to self-sustain their own combat capabilities. So it'll be a few years, but they are going to wage as much of an economic war on the United States as they can before then.
All right, but
Now-
I'm just trying to wrap my head around because let's say they did build up to having like a kind of peer navy with the U.S. Doesn't the U.S. still have the fucking home court advantage of having all the ground base air or naval defenses that China
Yes.
the base that China
One-
would have had if we tried to invade China? Like it still
But-
doesn't seem like it would.
But again, as I said, the battleground would be Canada. It wouldn't be the United States, it would be Canada. And thus they would travel up the Northwest Passage into the Hudson Bay. So
And
then
there's another front we're neglecting to discuss, but we'll get to that when you're done. I just want to try to keep that in my mind.
well, yes, you're absolutely correct. Mexico is a potential issue. But
I wasn't even talking about Mexico. I was talking about cyberspace. I mean, we're going to have to secure our cyber infrastructure too in the event of war with Europe.
Europe
yes.
doesn't exactly have very good cyber war fighting capacity either.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Okay, so here's the thing that people need to understand about the whole cyber warfare thing. Cyber warfare is a two-way street. If you can find vulnerabilities in our shit, we can find vulnerabilities in your shit. And that's why cyber warfare has not really become a big thing, because it's just like with blowing oil infrastructure and pipelines and stuff like that. Everybody's kind of got this soft, tacit agreement that we would rather throw boots on the ground than do shit through cyber warfare, because at the end of the fucking day, everybody is vulnerable and nobody's invincible. So there's this tacit, unspoken agreement. Like when people are talking in the movies about, oh, the Russians hacked this or they hacked that, it's like, yeah, they went in, they snooped around a little bit, they kind of just, fucking poked and prod to see what was weak, and then they left. They didn't actually do anything because they know if they did something, it would be such a catastrophic problem for them as well that they're just not willing to take the risk. It's kind of like when you're...
So what you're saying is essentially that the powers are willing to engage in small-scale hacking and looking around and snooping around, but there is no massive cyber attacks on banking, infrastructure, and so on, because it basically would be the equivalent of pulling out, kind of sort of like opening up Pandora's box at that point.
Unless you're Israel. Israel still does it. Stuxnet.
Well, that's the thing, is Israel opened Pandora's box and then immediately closed the lid because they realized, oh shit, because the Iranians they threw it right back at them. A lot of people don't talk about this. When the Israelis released Stuxnet, literally a few years afterwards, the Iranians then hacked into Israel shit and fucked a bunch of shit up. And it was a very tit for tat situation. Just not a lot of coverage gets done about it because people don't want to realize, like, oh, hey, the Iranians aren't, some cave dwellers. They're pretty good at this shit. Mm-hmm. Are they the best? Probably not. But are they able to do it? Yeah. Oh.
Well, from what I heard, PLA units. Well, from what I heard, PLA unit 613998 is pretty good at hacking shit.
Well, and that's the thing is that once we know which side China is going to choose, is China going to go it alone, and are they going to be an antagonist, or are they going to be like, okay, fuck it, we're with the Russians and the Americans? That's when that decision has to be made. And if China decides to go it alone, that's when we know the PLA controls that government. If they choose to join with us, that's when we know the government is in control.
Yeah, because I was thinking that in this hypothetical scenario of America versus a united Europe, and if Russia steps in to assist us, China, ain't no telling which way China would go.
Hey, give me a split second.
We need to ask ourselves the big question of, in regards to the People's Republic of China, of what their national objectives are as a political entity and what the ultimate goal of the Communist Party in China is. So, if there is a war between a unified European superstate with the EU versus the Russian Federation, we need to ask ourselves, what would China's purpose for the intervention be? And what would Pooh Bear do?
Well, so let me lay out some speculation that I've been having for a long time. So, personally speaking, I do not believe for even a second that the hey Gavin, we are recording, by the way, bud.
Oh, I love that you had to warn me immediately.
But what you end up having is, personally, speculation-wise, I believe that the Chinese goal is dominance of their particular region. Because here's the thing, is that China has been invaded and humiliated over their history like no other. Let's be honest. The Mongols, the fucking the Koreans, the Japanese, like a lot of people will forget this. The Koreans, even though they were technically a tributary state of the Chinese Empire, the Koreans had fought them to a standstill at the Yalu River. And so the Koreans had basically said, okay, look, you know what? We'll pay you tribute. We'll do this. But you have to stay on that side of the river. If you try to come to this side of the river, we're going to kill you again. And, it was an amicable relationship overall. But the Chinese have never truly been able to exert power outside of their nation. Like, let's be honest. What was the first taste of exerting power outside of their nation that they had?
Tibet?
Exactly. Good job, Dale. I was actually hoping you would actually know that one.
Of course.
But Tibet was their first time actually being able to exert power outside of their nation. And it was against a country that didn't fight back. But every time they've tried, Korea, Japan, the Mongolians, the Vietnamese, et cetera, the Chinese have gotten their asses blasted every time. And then...
Yeah.
To actually add something with the whole Tibet thing is, as Westerners, we view the whole Tibet-China thing as like China invading a foreign country, but to the Chinese themselves, they kind of see Tibet as kind of sort of just a remnant from the warlord era, and it's kind of the equivalent of if Russia collapsed into warlords, but they recaptured Moscow or whatever when the warlord era
Well,
was like finishing up.
yeah,
So,
they can claim.
in regards to Tibet, it literally feels like to them it's just the re-annexation of an old territory, which just went off and did its weird super monarchist religious thing for a little bit, and then just like kind of crawled back.
Well, yeah, of course they view it that way, but at the end of the fucking day, let's be honest. They've even going back. Tibet was a tributary at best. The Tibetans had never allowed the Chinese to actually exert direct control over them. They were just a tributary. If you go past, I want to say it was like the 1100s or something like that when Tibet was made a tributary. So, at the same time, yeah, you can say that, but then you can also say, oh, Korea was, a piece of the Chinese empire, when in reality it wasn't. And that's the point.
Hey, that's not me justifying Chinese imperialism. That's just me telling it from like the way they genuinely see the world.
No, and I understand. You're just telling it from the perspective. I'm just giving you the context of, yeah. But the point is at the end of the day, you have, again, you have two ways that the Chinese can go. They can either go the PLA route, which is, go at it their own and try to be a superpower, or a great power, I should say, and try to be the dominant great power, or they can just say, fuck it, let's form an alliance of great powers that actually because here's the thing, is the whole superpower bullshit that they, spread back in the 1900s, there was no such thing as superpowers. There was great powers. It was just, they didn't want to acknowledge the old great power system. And may I ask, are you guys aware of the great power system?
Of course. I've played enough. I've played enough thousands of hours of Paradox games to know about that.
Okay, so and mind you, the Paradox games were not the first ones to introduce this idea. Mm-hmm. So you had the idea of great powers and secondary powers. You had this idea that basically the top 10 countries of the world were considered the great powers, and then the next 20 were considered the secondary powers. And the whole idea being, okay, these are the powers that, can rival us in some way or fashion, and then these are the powers that if we don't keep an eye on them, they could replace us at some point in time in the future. Well, what you end up having is that China needs to make the decision: do we stay a great power, or do we potentially lose that great power status? And the moves made by Xi Jinping is very clear. He wants to stay a great power. The PLA are the ones that are, the, make it or break it kind of deal. And they're like, no, it's a zero-sum game. Either we're the dominant power of the planet, or we're nothing. And unfortunately, that's kind of the situation. We have to figure out which way the Chinese are going to go. Now, when it comes to the whole dynamic of a federalized Europe, if that actually happens, I know exactly which way the Chinese are going to go, because Europe's going to come knocking on China's door again. So, but that's just my position. Your mileage may vary.
What if the deal where if there's a world war, hypothetically, what if it's a weird thing where at first they're on one side, but then they change sides to the others? For example, what if at first they're technically against the Americans because they invaded Taiwan because they wanted to get rid of the other Chinese government that's in exile in Taiwan and to, quote, achieve national reunification? Sorry, there's a lot of background noise in my house from other people. I'm trying to raise my voice to
you're fine.
Hear about that. So, achieve national reunification. They occupy Taiwan. They get what they wanted, ideologically and politically, internally. Of we're the only Chinese government. LOL. Like the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek remnants are destroyed. Yada yada yada. They can make all that up, and then they fight the Americans briefly in the Pacific, and then they can change sides because America doesn't want an enemy with Russia. and then they could like do stuff against Europe, and they basically cannibalize the Europeans and
Well,
carve Europe into a sphere of influences. There's so many ways this conflict could go hypothetically. All right, it's just me kind of just throwing it out.
I will simply rebut with this. Look at what's happening with Ukraine right now. And Trump has already made it very clear that his interest in disassociating from Taiwan. There will be no war over Taiwan. Taiwan will peacefully be annexed by the Chinese. And I think that
not necessarily, with all due respect, and that's because of something very small, and it's in what we're using right now to communicate with each other. Want to guess what that is, gentlemen?
Sir, I would like to, again, as Trump has stated, and with Arizona and other sites that they're currently building, the whole chip manufacturing, reason for defending Taiwan, that's going to be non-existent in 2 to 3 years.
Well, that's actually very new. That's actually very new information to me. So I might be ignorant on the subject. But last time I checked, and keyword, this is last time I checked. This may have been like a few years on my part. So for everyone watching, forgive me here. But I remembered hearing something about how the Republic of China on Taiwan, they had the secrets on how to make the really good computer chips. Some countries tried to replicate it, but they couldn't really do it. And basically, the reason why no one wants Taiwan to get destroyed as an entity is because they might just say LOL and just self-destruct the information on how to make the computer chips, and then, oh, look, now humanity is out those really good computer chips, which is causing problems for everyone.
Well, I will point...
added information on that point. One of the recent deals that Trump just got announced in the last few days, and I remember I think Trump even mentioned it in his speech to Congress the other night,
He did.
One of the major investments that is coming into the United States is Taiwan Semiconductors is making $100 billion investment to start manufacturing chips in the United States.
That's good.
I apologize. You guys go ahead and keep talking. I need to AFK for a second.
No worries. Yeah, I know that at least when the prior administration in the U.S. passed some computer chip manufacturing act in like a couple of years ago, I know it didn't go very well. I remember it was like they did create one of those factories to make the chips, but it was only something like 10% as successful as the same ones in Taiwan. So,
well, no, okay, so the thing to understand about the CHIPS Act, the CHIPS Act is currently 5 years behind schedule. The facility isn't even complete yet in Arizona. So here's the point, is that you have a situation where the facilities aren't even online yet, but Donald Trump has taken up the mantle of getting that finished so that it can actually start happening soon. And one of the things to understand is that the reason why the CHIPS Act failed was because, well, let's be honest, they've already exposed plenty of corruption and fraud in regards to where the fuck is my pocket? In regards to the government. I can only imagine that a lot of the money for the CHIPS Act has been misappropriated.
probably.
And that's the thing, is that, with how far behind schedule they are, it's obvious the money wasn't used to hire the contractors needed to actually fucking get the facility up and running as fast as they were supposed to get it.
Right.
So, but no, there is movement on that front, and thus, I don't believe that Taiwan will be a sticking point between the U.S. and China. I don't believe it at all.
Well, another thing I actually need to think about, here, just because we're talking about Asia here, is so under this reformist United States, under Donald Trump and the ideology I call MAGAism, which is anti-globalist and is questioning a lot of the nonsense the United States has been doing for decades now, like wanting to leave NATO and all this other stuff, and basically let the Europeans burn and be at least friendly to a degree with Russia and yada 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 yada. I can't help but think about the American orbit, and I can't help think about, would the United States still defend South Korea and Japan? Or would it go so far that they just say, we don't give a fuck?
So, well, that's okay. So, in regards to South Korea and Japan, one of the things you have to understand about those two is that. So let's focus on Japan first, because South Korea is a little bit of a special case. So Japan is basically an extension of the United States at this point in time, and the Chinese have basically straight up said, we do not plan to do anything in regards to Japan, because they can't. Because at the end of the day, they attack Japan, and then the U.S. is like, "Oh, you touched our what? You touched our anime waifus? Oh, get fucked." And so, and another thing to potentially consider is the integration of Japan into a North American pan Pacific organization. Basically, the idea being is that, Japan, the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and a few other nations potentially getting together and basically saying, like, hey, look, like Australia, a lot of people, like, oh, Australia is loyal to the crown and blah, 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 so on and so forth. And it's like, well, loyalty only gets you so far when you're, when the people who are supposed to defend you are halfway across the fucking world. What happens if all of a sudden they're part of the U.S. framework? They're a lot safer because they have Japan, they have themselves, they have New Zealand, they have, the potential of the Asian Tiger 5 and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of potential there across the board. Now, in the case of Korea or South Korea, I have been talking about this for the past couple years, and the more evidence I see, the more I'm convinced that this is most likely the possibility that's working its way down. I think that North Korea is going to subsume the government of South Korea, not as a communist nation, but as a monarchy. Because the more that I see from Kim Jong-un and his sister's a big part of this, by the way. I think that she has a lot more to do with the government there than is actually realized. But I have a feeling, given how they have continuously kind of, handled the old communist hardliners in such a drastic fashion, that they're not wanting to be the old, the old communist regime. They want to become the new monarchy. And I would ask the question to the gallery, what is the former capital of the Korean Empire?
Pyongyang.
Pyongyang. And mind you, there's a lot of back and forth with the current South Korean government where democracy might not be their thing necessarily. Something along the lines of a Japanese constitutional monarchy might be more their thing. And there's a lot of hatred towards the current royal family. Well, okay, let me rephrase. There's a lot of animosity towards the ruling family that's been in power since, the empire fell. So there's a lot of potential that you could see the North take over the South in a mostly peaceful fashion, and the Kims end up becoming the royal family. And then you have a constitutional monarchy on the peninsula.
I don't mean to be that guy, but given how backwards economically, politically, and even militarily North Korea is, I do not see a scenario where North Korea annexes the South, in my opinion. Sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, so I'll ask the questions. Okay? So let's start with the military. What's backwards about the military?
North Korea's military looks good and all for like military parades, and believe me, I watch them themselves. Their guys look cool and everything. But the reality is, North Korea, for the soldiers, lacks the training and possibly the supply consumption for it to be available for them to
Okay.
actually fight North Korea.
Okay, cool.
Not to mention the economic
Yeah.
situation.
Well,
Okay, no. We're taking it piece by piece here.
well,
So
just
the military.
So just on the military situation, I just remember this one thing that happened a couple of years back where there was some member of the military defected from North Korea to South Korea during the first Trump administration. They were shot at and but they got through, and while they were recovering, it turned out they were infested with parasitic worms and shit like that, and it just seems that a military in which your soldiers are infested with parasites isn't going to be that something seriously wrong when your soldiers
Dale,
are.
let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. What parasites exist in North America, in your section of North America?
I'm not sure.
It's very few.
Oh, yeah.
It's very few. And why is that?
Because we
Because it's
try
cold.
to. Oh, yeah.
It's cold.
And
Now-
also we have good medical facilities. We try to get rid of parasites.
Stop.
Mhm.
So then go to the southern United States.
Mm-hmm.
There's parasites fucking everywhere. It's because it's subtropical.
But the U.S.
Korea-
military,
Korea
U.S.
is
servicemen
further-
aren't generally filled with parasites, even when they come from the south.
There's definitely a higher rate of them.
Maybe is there?
Okay, yes,
Don't they
yes,
all have
there
to
is.
get physicals? And
Yeah, and shit happens. Shit just fucking happens, dude. I will point this out. A bunch of people were trying to talk shit about the USA because so many people died in the USA during the revolution, and the USA didn't really win that war. And it's okay, yeah, 176,000 people dying from disease. Even in the modern day, let's just take Iraq and Afghanistan. How many guys were getting sick from eating the local food and eating the water and shit, or drinking the water and shit?
And my response
Probably
would be
some.
that several American soldiers, did get sick,
but they were
drinking
treated for it.
Iraqi water, or they got a little bit of
Well,
a
and
stomach
that's-
bug from local natural.
Well, and here's the point.
They
Here's the
had the
point.
medicine to fix
The
that.
difference is, gentlemen, but the difference is that a North Korean soldier who is in North Korea should not be getting overly sick over native, problems. Like, for example, it's a similar thing to where a Mexican can drink Mexican water because he's naturally used to the bacterium that exists in the environment. It's natural. But as a Texan, if I went down to Mexico and drank their tap water, I would get horribly sick. All right, that's fine. That happens. That's just how humans are. But a North Korean being with parasites and crossing the border, it's not just him having a problem of being, he's got a little bit of
the
sick
point
from
is-
going to another country. It's North Korea is a shithole. I
Yeah,
don't know what else to say.
The point is that shit fucking happens.
But
So if you're gonna use one example,
well, it's the
then
only example that I can point. It's the only example I can point to of a recent defection.
okay, cool. That's the
But I will
That's the-
say,
that's the
I
only-
will
that's-
say, I will say to Varg here. I will say to Varg, however, I think the North Korean military is garbage, and I actually, from my research, there is a lot of problems with North Korea. It's a shithole. However, I don't know exactly the validity precisely on the story of the North Korean defector going down south and him being filled with parasites, because I will say that American and South Korean propaganda benefit from over-exaggerating aspects of North Korea. Now, this isn't to say North Korea is a good country with a good standard of living, but even I believe that parts of it are over-exaggerated, and some aspects have been even made up.
Sure.
So
Well,
I
and-
think that there's a chance that story is over-exaggerated or fake. I will say that, because propaganda is everywhere.
Well, and my point is that at the end of the day, you have you have all this shit that's talked about and said and so on and so forth, but the fact of the matter is that we don't know. Like, for example, a lot of people talk about the hunger issue. Let's get into the economics of North Korea. A lot of people talk about the famines. They talk about, oh, they don't have food, they don't have this, yada, yada, yada. Okay, why don't they have that stuff? Do any of you know the reason?
I actually know the reason. It's because in the 90s, with the collapse of the Soviet Union and North Korea, not getting like help from its main old trade partner and ally and everything.
Okay.
The Soviet Union had propped it up. Another thing was there's a big horrible drought that happened in the 90s, if my memory is correct.
Okay. So, again, that's not the answer I'm looking for. Where is all the farmland on the peninsula?
In the
South.
It's in the south. So the north, where all the natural resources are, was the mining and industrial heart of Korea. And so what ends up happening is that you have the agricultural south split from the industrial north. The industrial north does not have the space nor the quality of agricultural land in order to actually sustain itself. And thus, you have a situation where they're not able to feed their people properly because they don't have the capacity to do it, thus requiring the need from outside sources. Now, yes, after you get past that point, Doc, you are correct. The collapse of the Soviet Union, because a lot of people, they make the mistake of thinking that North Korea is friends with the Chinese. They're not. They're friends with the Russians. They're friends with the Russians. You got to remember, being a Soviet, you can be a Russian and be a Soviet, but being a Soviet doesn't mean you're a Russian. And so you end up having this situation where North Korea, its situation isn't the same as it was 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. It's a totally different situation. And that situation is going to continue changing and continue improving as time goes on. So this idea that it's impossible, it was considered impossible that Russia could economically survive U.S. sanctions. And yet it survived. I'm just going to point out the evidence is in the pudding. So...
But Russia also was a much better footing than North Korea. Like Russia industrialized at least 100 years before any of those sanctions.
Just because and no, that's not even the thing to consider. The thing is to consider is that what you need to. Oh, hold on. Sorry, let me take a drink real quick. This fucking payday is killing me. What you need to consider is the fact that, yes, there are problems, but how do you fix those problems? And as they fix those problems, how does your situation improve? And that's the whole point, is we're not talking tomorrow. We're talking 5, 10 years from now. Again, I'm saying that the Europeans aren't going to be able to match the United States for 20. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point, is this idea that, just because the situation is one way today doesn't mean that it's going to be that same way 10 years from now.
I mean, of course. I mean, hell, like right now the United States is more closer with Russia than it is Europe. So, hey, things can change in a heartbeat.
Well, and you have to understand that we've always been friends with Russia. It was the Europeans that destroyed that alliance.
Yeah. But just back to the whole Korea thing, but also, let's say they do improve over 20 years. That would also, you'd have to then also assume that South Korea would just stay stagnant, because South Korea will also be, South Korea is way ahead. So unless they stay stagnant for those 20 years while North Korea improves, it's not like the gap,
we're
the
not
gap
talking
may not
industry. We're not talking about industry. We're not talking about military. We're talking about politics. We're talking about the political system.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, the only
point
context...
is that
The only context I personally see North Korea annexing South Korea is if today there's a coup d'etat in North Korea which overthrows the Kim family and they establish a democratic, constitutionalist, traditionalist-based government, which is extremely based
Again,
off of the Russian Federation, and then they improve a bunch of stuff, and then this new Korean National Republic, we'll call it, because it sounds kind of cool. I could totally see the Korean National Republic being like,
but
"Hey,
again,
we're not the communist dogs anymore, and nor are we the American imperialist puppets anymore. Joining with us for a true unified and national Korean state." Then I could totally see that shit happening. Honestly, I could
but
see that.
again, you have to understand. Again, all the evidence is pointing towards because, again, if you look at all the people that Kim Jong Un has gotten rid of, along with his sister, that they have gotten rid of, you notice that it's all the communist hardliners. They have moderated very heavily over the past 10 years.
Moderated with regard to what specifically?
Oh, for example, when's the last time there was an actual fucking skirmish on the border?
A while?
The 2000s, early 2000s.
Early 2000s. It was like 2002, 2003, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also a conflict which is actually called, funny enough, the Second Korean War, where there's a bunch of skirmishes on the southern border in the, in the late 80s. But yeah, besides that, it's actually been kind of peaceful since the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the point, though, is that there hasn't been any conflict on the peninsula in over 20 years. And overall, if the Kims continue rooting out the hardliners, they continue moderating, they continue diplomatically working with the Russians and actually creating the conditions for them to actually get out of the glut that they've been in since the fall of the Soviet Union. The North, again, if they position themselves as a constitutional monarchy, which I do believe that's where they're heading, that seems to be what the Koreans want.
So you mean to say that given enough time, let it be under Kim Jong Un or after he passes away or whatever, his son or little sister or whatever, they go on national television and they declare the end of the so-called Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the establishment of a constitutionalist democratic Kingdom of Korea. Is that actually where we're heading?
I do believe so.
And so is your contention that this is it's going to stop being a ridiculous country where you can only have one of 5 approved haircuts, and you can't watch any media that's and you can't watch any media that's not Korean?
I'm saying it right now.
Yeah.
I'm saying it right now. I don't like North Korea, but the haircut thing is bullshit. They don't have more than just 5 approved haircuts. That's bullshit. That's American propaganda. All right.
Is it?
I fucking hate North Korea, but the haircut thing is actually propaganda.
How so? I'm open to the idea of it being propaganda,
Beyond ridiculous. And they say there's only 5 approved haircuts, but when I watch videos on North Korea, I see people in the crowds having haircuts that are not on the 5 approved list. So
when I said 5, I was just guessing. Could be more than 5.
I'm not kidding you.
No.
That was actually pushed 5 haircuts.
No, that's the official line that they pushed about North Korea. And mind you, Kim Jong Un was not the one that put that policy into place. His father was.
Right. But
well, let me rephrase. The policy that they used as the impetus, there were particular traditional haircuts that you had to abide by. Mm-hmm. The whole 5 list thing was propaganda, but there was a policy that the propaganda was based on. But Kim got rid of that policy.
You mean
Kim
Jong-un? They're all Kims.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, sorry.
No worries.
Jong-un got rid of that policy, and notice how Kim Jong-un has, enjoyed having lots of different haircuts over the years.
Right. But I mean, those policies would never apply to, the Supreme Leader.
To be completely honest, I actually believe that because North Korea's military is actually getting a lot of influence from Russia. And this is before the meme. This is before the propaganda thing of, oh, North Korea sending troops to Ukraine. I'm not talking about that nonsense. That's a different can of worms. But I'm talking about this can of worms. And I was looking and studying up North Korea's military and everything, and I was even looking at their parades and everything. There was a huge Russian influence where North Korean soldiers are even walking around in Russian-given equipment, like Ratnik gear and everything. It's crazy. So, and there actually was, and this isn't just nonsense. This isn't just propaganda. This actually happened where a few years ago there was a bunch of North Korean high-ups, like in generals and everything, that actually went to Russia and actually like just hung out with the Russians. So, a conspiracy I kind of brewed up, and a few others of my friends brewed up, is that if I was Russia and I wanted North Korea to be under my sphere of influence, we asked ourselves the question, how would you bring North Korea under your influence? How would you do it? Because the Kim family is technically your ally, but they're not actually as stable as it could be because they're still, weird communists. Let's be real here. How would you do it? Well, I would say, LOL, influence the right people in the military to then launch a military coup d'etat to establish a nationalist Korean republic, and then you can give support to this new nationalist Korean republic, which would be more closely ideologically aligned to you and wouldn't require the same strict Orwellian system of control that Kim requires just to keep himself around. And now you have a new republic
Well,
with local rights, and then boom, you can cooperate with them. And yeah,
I'm gonna point something out to you, and I do love the schizo posting. However, those same generals happen to be Kim's allies.
true, but have you seen how many times that Kim dude, purges generals? Oh,
No,
this
no, 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 no.
I asked for this Atia 30 minutes ago. Oh, so. Send you to the death cap, I will.
No, no. The point is that the generals that were the problem back in the day. For example, you remember back in the day when Kim was in the hospital because he had been poisoned. What we later found out was poison, and his sister was running things.
No, that wasn't him being poisoned. He just ate some bad, he just ate some bad
No, it was. No. Shut the fuck up. No, it was confirmed that he was actually poisoned. The Chinese are not gonna bullshit about it. Like, in my opinion, they're not gonna bullshit about it.
Well, of course it was poison. That's what happens when you go to Little Caesars, all right? You get poisoned.
But the point is that when all of that went down, several high-ranking generals within the Korean military went to his sister, offering their support in a coup against Kim, against Jong-un. And then all of a sudden, those generals, after he's recovered, those generals are put on trial and executed.
LOL, I don't even blame them. Have you seen pictures of Kim's sister? Damn, she's a fucking hottie.
I'm gonna have to agree with you on that. But that's the point, though. And honestly, just to wrap up this topic, Korea will be unified. My money is on being under a northern constitutional monarchy, and the old royal family is going to basically be told, okay, look, you can't stay here, you got to go. You're going to be allowed to leave, but you need to leave. And the reason why I say that is because look at Japan. Japan, a lot of people will call a democracy. It's not a democracy. It's a constitutional monarchy with a very heavy emphasis on American republicanism. Because if you notice, the Yamatos have immense fucking power within the government. The royal family says jump, people jump. Period in a story. And I believe the more I see, the more I hear about Korea, the more I believe that's what they want. And the constant bullshit in the South, because let's face it, how many presidents in Korea and other public officials have been arrested on corruption charges? How many have been arrested on this, that, or the other?
Quite a
It's
lot.
There's
it's
too many.
fucking
There's too
ridiculous.
many to count,
Yeah.
Jenna. There's too
But-
many to count.
The issue with the Japanese royal family, though, is the Japanese royal family only has that power, and it's a cultural power because they're beloved and revered by their people. Like, South Korea does not have any reverence for the Kims. If anything,
Well,
South
that's the
Korea has
thing.
great antipathy towards the Kims. And
Honestly,
But
this
that's
is
the point, though.
honestly
If-
this is very fascinating to me. Has there ever been a time where a schizo regime like North Korea then basically takes its meds and says, "LOL, we're going to be something less schizo and become something normal like a constitutional monarchy," and
I
like
don't
lays
think
back
so.
on totalitarianism? Like that's like the equivalent of in 1984. Let's just say Big Brother exists, he's a real person, and Big Brother says, "You know what? I think I'm done being like, Big Brother," and he changes Oceania from the weird totalitarian nightmare into a constitutional monarchy with himself as a
Hey,
constitutional monarchy.
Doc,
It's a very
I'm gonna
unique.
give you the example. We literally have a historical example of this.
Is it
France.
Japan?
France.
Oh,
Well, I'd say the closest example wouldn't be France. The only close and it's not that close, but the only close example
Okay.
would be Chile. Would be Pinochet's Chile when Pinochet stepped down.
No. Think about it. You have a incredibly gutless and very apathetic royal family, which, let's face it, Marie Antoinette did not say, "Let them eat cake."
Mhm.
That's not what she said. That was fucking Robert's or
Robespierre.
Robespierre. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was Robespierre being a fucking little tyrant in his own way.
Mhm.
That was him being a dickhead. He just wanted to cut a bitch's head off. But they were gutless and apathetic to the situation in the country. They they did not understand how to fix the problem. Then you have the revolution, which, okay, so you have a gutless and apathetic royal family in Korea, then you have a revolution. And then, over time, now it was a lot faster in France because Korea has basically been put in stasis for as long as it has been. I do believe had an actual peace and an actual accord been made in regards to Korea, this would have happened a lot sooner. But I digress. Then all of a sudden you have somebody who reverses all the fucking bullshit policies, revitalizes the nation, and starts actually rebuilding what was lost. Now, am I saying Kim Jong-un is some genius like Napoleon? Not at all. But what I'm saying is that he most certainly, given the moves that he has made within recent memory, given the moves that he has made, it is very clear that he understands things have to change. They cannot stay the way they are. And thus, he is actively trying to pursue diplomatic relations with the United States. He's trying to shore up his relations with Russia as hard as he can. And he's attempting to also moderate the shit out of his government. Now, yes.
He's also successfully, might I add, moderating his weight. That's not even a joke. Have you seen how much more skinny Kim has gotten?
Dude, he looks great.
I'm actually really
He
I'm
looks
actually oddly
great.
proud of him now. Like, I remember seeing like North Korea be like, all right, here, enough of the 1980s style of old ass like parades. Here's the super cinematic thing where everyone's walking around with Kevlar. I'm like, oh, what the hell happened? This actually looks like better. Like even the people in the crowd look a little bit like less like disheveled and everything. What's going on? And then Kim walks out and he looks like much more thinner. I'm like, oh wait, I know what happened. That's why North Korea is better, because this guy, all the money that went towards buffets was lessened a little bit. Ayo.
You're a fucking dickhead. But the point is that you have a situation where all the evidence that I am seeing personally, again, it's all speculation at the end of the fucking day. This entire podcast is speculation. But in my opinion, in my speculation, I do believe that he will end up creating a situation where, and maybe it ends up being a constitutional monarchy that does exactly what Japan did. where you have the constitutional monarchy with the republicanism.
All
It
right,
might happen.
Warhound. I will admit, my whole thing of a North Korean military influenced by the Russian Federation to overthrow the Kim family and establish a North Korean republic based off the Russian Federation was some extreme, schizo, shit posting. But can you admit the idea of Kim Jong Un reorganizing Korea into a new kingdom is some schizo shit too? I'll just admit my thing is schizo. If you admit your thing is a little bit schizo too. All right, I'm just saying.
Oh, well, all speculation is schizo. What do you mean?
Oh, some more
Yeah,
than
at
others.
least we're not Zelensky, who thinks somehow he could take Moscow. Ayo!
Yeah. Just the thing. If we maybe go back to the original subject for a minute, what we were talking about as far as your speculation that if Europe becomes federal, and 20 years down the road they get the idea to start waging not just an economic but a military war. Well, that kind of begs the question, given what we've seen in Europe right now. Where are they going to get the economy and the resources to build a military that could take on the United States or Russia?
Well, that's the thing is, I would not be surprised that within the next year or two, if they start the process of federalizing, I would not be surprised to hear about a bunch of contracts being issued to the Canadians. I fully believe that Canada is the piggy bank.
Yeah. But then again, if they go into a military war with the United States, there's going to be a big ocean between Europe and their piggy bank with some rather angry United States submarines in between.
We're also forgetting the very angry Hungarians and Polands who don't want to be part of this gay-ass European empire. Ayo.
Not to mention the possibility of Italy and Romania, and possibly some other Eastern European countries that might say, "Oh hell no, we went through this with the Warsaw Pact. We're not doing this."
Oh, the Italians,
yeah,
actually, the United States doesn't need to worry about even launching a naval invasion, like it's D-Day or whatever. They can just send troops to Italy. After all, they're Italians. They'll always switch sides. Ayo.
And you could do it in glass-bottomed landing craft, so that way they could look down through the bottom of the boat and see where the Italian Navy's at.
Good joke, because the Italian Navy probably wouldn't even need to be sunk. It would just surrender and switch sides.
Correct.
Okay, real quick. So Stoner posted a question inside chat. As America separates from Europe, what's the likelihood of America seeing a civil war of Trump Vance aligned Americans versus the progressive liberal Europhile freaks? Okay.
Well, here's the difference. Conservatives discuss, what caliber of firearm goes into said firearm. The leftists are talking about who is appropriate to go into a bathroom. That's all you need to know.
It is worth it is worth noting, because you said Stone progressive liberal Europhile freaks. You kind of have to separate that into two categories. You have the liberal Europhiles and the progressive freaks. The progressive freaks aren't really Europhiles; they're just freaks and degenerates. Different groups of people.
So here's the thing. Okay, so to actually give him a serious fucking answer, the likelihood is slightly strong. I'd say better than 20%. And the reason being is because there are two groups that you actually have to take into consideration. You have the Europhiles, which I refer to as the loyalists, and then you have the communists.
Yeah.
These two groups are heavily militarizing in different fashions. The communists are militarizing a little faster than the Europhiles, but unfortunately the Europhiles, depending on if you're willing to accept some potential shenanigans to do with a certain diaspora that took over places like, is it Ellensville, New York, or Ellensburg, New York? I forget. I think it's Ellenville. If you want to accept, certain diaspora are going to be used to launch a anti-American EU-funded campaign, yes.
Would this happen to be a diaspora that recently Trump has said he's revoking temporary protected status for about 200,000 of.
No, the diaspora in regards is the Ukrainians.
That's the
Unless
one.
he-
That's the one Trump just said he's.
he did?
He's revoking about temporary protected status for about 250,000 Ukrainians in the U.S.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
For
Okay.
that exact reason,
Actually-
I'm assuming.
That actually, watching his basically executive order signing session this afternoon, which Asmongold broadcasted. Basically, Trump was directly asked about that, and he said basically they still had that under consideration because a lot of his cabinet members were split on whether or not he should revoke the protected status for those almost like 250,000 Ukrainian refugees that came here shortly after the war started.
Well, the fact of the matter is that they're a national security threat.
Mm-hmm.
A total agreement on that, considering too
Send them back
they-
to Russia.
the Ukrainian state media started foaming at the mouth today, issuing little statements hinting that someone should assassinate President Trump, such as one of their more prominent media companies issued a little statement with the line in it, "Where's Lee Harvey Oswald when you need him?"
The
Yes.
wise words of John Doe, also known as a soldier from TF2, I will say this. Ukraine is not a real country. You are a Russian wearing a dress.
Basically. Well,
But no.
if you talk about the stuff the U.S. was insisting that Ukraine do in order to get funding over the last few years, that's actually quite accurate. They are just Russians wearing dresses.
But the point is that those are the two groups that we have to be majorly concerned about. And so, yes, Stoner, I would say a better than 20% chance that yes, there could be a civil war brewing. Not a civil war necessarily, an
But
insurgency.
civil conflict.
No, an insurgency.
Right.
Europhiles and communists versus the nation.
Yeah, well, you're already
the
seeing a bunch of commies burning down Tesla charging stations and shit, and trying to set fire to and shoot at Tesla dealerships in
Yep.
fucking progressive cities.
Yep.
Somehow, terrorism.
Yeah, and that's one other aspect to it as well. Where are most of the communists and Europhiles going to be located?
Large
In an
cities.
urban setting. This is
Yep.
very well much shake down basically also to rural versus urban.
Yeah. Very easy to cut
Well,
off
I
those
don't-
large urban
here's the
centers.
thing.
They're all squeezed together in these hive cities. Cool. Then we know where to launch the nukes.
And we
Okay.
know, and then we know also where to cut off the food supply to.
Yep, it's pretty easy
As
to
in
cut off. It's pretty easy to like cripple a big city.
Bitch, these
Well, and
people
here's-
these people can't get their freaking soy lattes for 2 days. You know, they're
Yeah.
going to surrender. You don't even
True.
have to cut off the food.
Hmm.
Well, here's the thing, and this is the big thing to understand about the situation is that you have specific locations. You know, the Ukrainians, they're really easy to fucking figure out. Like just roll through a fucking town, you'll see the flags.
Mhm.
The communists, they're a little more esoteric.
Look for any of those fucking Pride Progress flags. There you find them.
Well, that's the thing though, is it just some fucking dweeb, or is it a commie? And that's the problem. Because there's plenty of dweebs that fly those flags as well because they're idiots. But I digress.
Or spot people showing up to a protest dressed all in black with masks over their face. There's a good bet they're
Yep.
on the communist / Antifa side of things.
Yep. And so, you know, very high, like, again, better than 20% chance that, yes, they do try to drum up a internal conflict within the United States. And the reason why I say yes is because they've done it before. The Europeans drummed up the U.S. Civil War. It happened. You know, people I've had several people try to push back on me on this, and I'm like, okay, so what was one of the main service rifles of the Confederate Army? Oh, you mean the 1853 Enfield musket? Literally one of the main rifles that they fucking used the entire time?
And if I remember right, they also had quite a few. I believe it was the Armstrong Whitworth sniper rifles.
Oh yes, they didn't have a lot of those. It was a couple hundred, but yes, they did have those. And then I forget the Chalavet. I forget what it was called. It was like the 18. I want to say it was like the 1858 or something like that. You know, Chalavet, which was a French rifle or a musket. But the point is that, you know, the British and French supported the Confederacy. And while I'm not completely against what the Confederacy was intending by being like, hey, you can't do this to us economically, speaking of the tariffs from the North, I also acknowledge that, okay, the North needed to beat the Confederacy and prevent the Europeans from splitting the nation. So it's a very, very murky situation, and you know, just overall. So
yeah, there's one other factor that's actually complicating things these days as well. When you actually have one of the two major political parties in the country that seems to specialize in trying to stir up as much civil strife and chaos as utterly possible.
Mm-hmm.
damn it. I keep forgetting to do my call-ins because of this. But yeah, so, you know, overall, there's a good chance. And again, it'll be part of their toolbox. When the time comes for them to actually engage in open warfare against the United States, it will be part of their toolbox. And we have to be prepared for it. And the way we prepare for it is by building a relationship with the Russians, forcing the Chinese to accept, like, hey, stay where you are and just do your thing. Don't worry about trying to fucking control Asia, because you're not going to be able to do it, because there's, you know, us and Russia will booty spank you if you try. Join our architecture. And then at that point in time, like, and let's be frank, like across the board, if all of these other nations get together and create a check against a federalized Europe, what does the EU do?
Not much.
Are they gonna fight the entire world? Don't think it'll go too well for them.
Another thing that I think is worth noting, just what army are they even going to fight? Like, Europe doesn't exactly have much in the way of military at the moment, and even if they like do beef it up, like I have seen now countless videos of people, like man on the street videos of people going and interviewing the let's call them the migrants in the various European countries, and when asked like would you fight for this country, they all say hell no, it's not my country. So the people they're importing in to replace their own people, they're not going to fight for them. And this problem is only going to get worse the more, you know, in 20 years.
I will give you a key example.
Yeah.
I will literally give you a key example. Keir Starmer just signed a bill that lessens prison sentences for lessens prison sentences for white Britons. It gives them the more likelihood of being under custodialship, which is basically house arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, they're already laying the groundwork to get rid of the people that they know they can't rely on. They're already laying the groundwork for it. So the whole migrant thing, if anything, they'll start chasing them either out of the country, because they'll be able to be like, okay, look, you came here illegally, you didn't do the proper process, you're getting deported. Or if they did do the proper shit and they came there legally, they'll start chasing them into particular places and turning them into the working class, where they're the ones that are doing all the other shit, while the actual European patriots, quote unquote, then go into the military. Oh no, there's the groundwork for this is being laid. That's why I'm like, oh yeah, we need to be on top of this.
Additionally, there was saw one report there today to where the German government is already discussing reintroducing conscription for the armed forces.
Yep.
That's some great news from me, because those dumbasses, like, put up the price of Flextarn camo. Let me tell you, as a military collector, the Ukraine war has pissed me off, because ever since that war started, the price for a Flextarn jacket in my size went from $15 up to $70. So if they decide to mass conscript their population and thus need new uniforms, cool. There's going to be a lot more stuff on that on the market. It's about time they made up for all the shit they wasted on the Ukrainians. That was just my very dumb rant, because as a military collector, the Ukraine war pisses me off like you would not believe. Had I known this dumb shit would have happened, and the Europeans would have just screamed and just threw everything at the Ukrainians, I would have bought so much European surplus in 2019 before everything happened, and then resell it like it's stocks.
Yeah, one other thing to consider too, besides Europe potentially being on the out and outs with both, eventually with the United States and Russia and China, you have to worry there's other regions of the world that used to be under European colonial rule that still hold quite a grudge against the Europeans right there, and would like nothing better than to see them burn and go to hell.
Oh, absolutely. You see what they're freaking out about right now with UN peacekeepers, right?
What?
The peacekeeping force that the Russians are recommending is Nigerian and Guyanese.
Interesting.
And the Europeans are freaking out about it. So, overall, you've got a situation where the, so-called third world is getting a seat at the table. And the Europeans are hating it right now. They despise them.
Storo just left a comment saying, I think the Europeans might have trouble with India. Probably.
Well, so that's the thing, is it depends on the Modi question. Because the problem is Modi truly a friend of Trump's, or is he just ass-kissing in order to keep in Trump's good graces? And that's the question. Depending on what Modi's government does, that could determine how it goes. A big piece of contention is Pakistan. Because here's the thing, is that the Europeans, in an effort to hurt the Indian government, might support the Pakistani movement that's currently ongoing in India to try to add territory to Pakistan. And, oh, by the way, Pakistan is a nuclear power.
Mm-hmm. But so is India.
Yeah, but the problem is that, Pakistan is crazy enough to use them.
Well, I assume India would retaliate if Pakistan started nuking them.
Well, it depends on the situation with India. How many nukes does India have versus Pakistan? And then does Pakistan have information on where India's nukes are located? Because, like, for example, and this is the big problem with the Indian government right now, is I don't know if their military could stand up to the Pakistanis supported by the EU.
Well, I mean, the last time they fought, like, India steamrolled them in 71. Like,
Yeah, the last time.
they also have, like, 5 or 6 times as many people and a much bigger economy. And, like,
The problem is that with EU backing, what could Pakistan do? That's the point. It's about taking all the pieces together, not just one.
And don't forget about those atomic equalizers that Pakistan has.
yeah. Well, I mean, in the
Well,
case of a
as
nuclear exchange, I'm pretty sure India would come out on top just because more land, more spread out people, and more people.
Well, no, that's the problem, is that then you have to deal with the internal insurgency. Because
India has a big Muslim population that's allied with Pakistan.
Exactly. And the Punjabi would love nothing more than to be like, hey, Pakistan, we'll help you if you give us our own state.
Also complicating the fact is, what was it, since the Ukraine war started? Thanks to probably Victoria Nuland and Anthony Blinken and USAID, they had like basically a coup in Pakistan. They're about a year or so back, where they replaced the prime minister that wanted to stay basically non-aligned, and replaced him with someone that was very favorable towards the United States.
Are you talking about Imran Khan?
Yes.
Yes, Imran Khan. Which, by the way, I just want to point out, the Israelis fucking hate Imran Khan. Funny enough, because they saw him as a fucking crazy man, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, and the people who replaced him aren't weird. No, and this is, and I guess we should move on to that elephant as well. Jesus, there's a lot of elephants in the room. It's feeling pretty claustrophobic in here.
Do we qualify as a herd yet?
I think it does. So you've got the situation with the Middle East in general right now, and I have a distinct feeling, depending on what happens going forward with the potentials that we're seeing with Israel, that one of two things is going to happen. A EU-supported Egypt and Turkey and all that going after Israel because Israel decides to go the other way and join the American sphere fully. So there are potentials there. But then there's also the problem that the fucking Israelis are like the whole conversation that me and Doc just had about fucking Korea. Like, if that was schizo, bro, the fucking Israelis need meds.
Yeah.
Like, bad. Because some of the shit that they start going off on, it's like, what?
I wouldn't say...
Like, they literally blame Russia for all their ills, by the way. Like, they literally blame the Russians for everything that has gone wrong in their lives, even though it's like, but the Russians aren't the Soviet Union. Like, sorry, but those two things were incompatible. The Russian people said, fuck your taxes. Like, come on.
Not to mention that little notion a lot of the Israelis have about creating something called Greater Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the whole Greater Israel thing, and the more I look into it, the more I'm actually like starting to realize why that notion has taken off as hard as it has, and it's because they finally reached the point of, the whole idea that a cornered animal is the most dangerous form of an animal. they finally got to the point where they're like, okay, fuck it, we're just gonna fucking start genociding across the fucking Middle East and just fucking, clear all this space away from Arabs and whatnot. So there's a big like, oh boy with that one, but the fact of the matter is that they're not militarily, they're incapable of doing it. Like, they will never be able, like, and this is the thing, and I've straight up told the Israelis, I have had Israelis basically want to fucking slit my throat because I've literally told them straight to their faces, you're nothing more than a fucking pressure valve for the Middle East. Sorry, I'm not trying to be a dick, but that's what you are. Like, at the end of the fucking day, you're meant to be there to be a fulcrum for the attention of the Middle East so the Europeans can operate in the Middle East without any restrictions whatsoever. And they fucking hate that. They fucking hate the idea that they're somebody's little bitch, but it's like, you are. You would not exist if it wasn't for the influence of outside parties.
Do I smell the British in here?
Yeah, seriously.
And do I smell bland food and warm beer?
Bland.
But no.
Understatement. I spent a couple of years over there, remember?
Is
But
their
no,
food really that terrible?
Yes.
So the problem with their food is this: is that back in the day they had an empire built on spice. Nowadays they don't. So yeah.
Yeah, that's what a couple decades of basically economic poverty resulting from having to fight 2 world wars close together will do to a society.
Yep.
Yeah. Now they can enjoy their blood and kidney pies all by themselves.
Hey, I love blood pudding. I think it's great.
Blood pudding is good, but blood and kidney pie is disgusting.
I've never
I think
had it.
you're talking from experience.
Yes. But
Who cooked it?
I had it at some restaurant. I think it was during some like catering service at a job I was at. Not sure exactly who, but yeah. The blood pudding though, I do have to say that one gets a bad rap, but that one's actually pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not pudding; it's a sausage, and I don't know why they call it pudding because it's nothing like pudding.
No. So what you need to understand about pudding, what the actual term pudding means. Mm-hmm. So a pudding is, how do I describe? It's basically like a ball of mush.
Think of haggis.
Haggis is good.
Never mention the word haggis around me again.
But the point is
and I want to try it. It sounds delicious.
It's a ball of mush that you can put a bunch of stuff into. You wrap it up in a cloth, in literally what's called a pudding cloth, and then you put it in boiling water. You boil it for like 45 minutes or something like that. You pull it out and then you can cut it up, and that is a pudding. What we call pudding here in North America is custard. Yeah. So there's that translation. The blood pudding is just a carnivore style pudding. It just kind of looks like a sausage because they put it into a sausage sleeve, but it is a pudding.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, food history, that's kind of my thing. So I do enjoy good colonial food. By the way, fucking.
There's a reason.
You would not have.
There's a reason why Tasting History with Max Miller is a good show to watch.
Yep.
Actually, no. You want a better one?
Mm-hmm.
There's someone better than Max.
Townsend.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've seen Townsend. He does some good stuff. As a matter of fact, on a video or two, I think Townsend and Max collaborated.
Yes, they did do some collaboration.
I
But
freaking love tasting history. And I like
Yeah.
how the guy is just milking the Titanic for everything he has. Like, welcome to Tasting History. Now is our 6th episode on eating stuff from the Titanic.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Well, he also did an episode. He also did an episode on the Carpathia, on the Lusitania, and on the Hindenburg.
Interesting. I'd love to know what they were eating on the Hindenburg. Probably a lot of sausages, because, Germany. Fucking sausages
You would be
and beer.
surprised at some of the desserts.
Would the after effects of the menu on the Hindenburg might have contributed to the gas explosion?
Okay,
Yes.
now we need the rim shot.
But anyways, the point is that, getting back to the core of the conversation, the Israelis, they are scared deathless. Like, they are fucking terrified. And again, they don't exist without outside influence. Like, I did love this one Israeli chick, losing her shit and being like, oh, all we need, we don't need America. We just need America to sell us weapons. And I'm like, well, that means you need America. Like, that literally means you need America. And that's the whole point, is that Israel is going to be an incredibly interesting topic here in the next, I'd say, 5 years, where it's really a test to see, one, do they survive? Because, well, possibilities. But also, do they finally break away from their European overlords? And, oh, that's why the gate's up. Screw you, dude. Screw you. Edit this out. Screw you so fucking hard. There's a cop that has his fucking cherries and berries on, and my gates are set up that when a cop rolls up with cherries and berries active, the gates will open for them. And so he's sitting just across the street, basically, and on a traffic stop, and it's causing the gate to hold open right now. And it's like, motherfucker. Anyways.
Yeah. Also, there's one other little interesting thing to watch Israel about. Considering news came out that apparently Trump persuaded the Russians to be the broker between the United States and Iran for coming to some sort of agreement.
Yeah.
Well, and do you know why? Do you know why that's important?
Because Iran is essentially, even though they try to be all hyper-independent, the Iranians are still kind of sort of a sub-faction to the Russians. So if the Russians do something, the Iranians would be smart to bow.
No. Bad. Bad, Doc. Bad. That's not what is going on.
Is it because of that port?
No. So here's the thing. There are two factions at war in Iran politically right now. You have the mullahs and you have the reformists. Now, a lot of people have this idea that the Russians back the mullahs. They don't. They never have. They've just had relations with the mullahs because of Bandar Abbas. But they've never backed the mullahs. There's a reason why it took the mullahs so long to get S-300s. Because the Russians, for the longest time, did not want to sell the Iranians S-300s. Now, what faction do the Russians back currently in Iran?
The reformists.
Exactly. Oh, by the way, what faction is the new president of Iran?
The reformists.
The point is that and funny enough, do you guys know who backs the mullahs right now?
Who?
China. Because China needs very much needs right now the access for the Belt and Road Initiative, and so right now they're backing the mullahs to be able to get that access, because they're not willing to hitch their horse to hitch their carriage to an unproven horse. Whereas the Russians, who have never backed the mullahs to begin with, they're like, oh, hey, somebody who's actually willing to work with us and actually willing to be diplomatic and actually willing to not be assholes. Yeah, we'll help you.
Yeah.
You need some more officials to die in random helicopter incidences? Yeah, we got you, bud.
I think it's worth. I think it's worth noting that like no one likes the mullahs. Not even like, not. Well, a lot of Iranians don't even like the mullahs.
Well, so there's a rumor going around that Quds has kind of turned on the mullahs. There's rumors going around that Quds has completely turned on the mullahs, and the IRGC is currently like in a fucking tizzy because it's like, wait, our intel services is basically just telling us to go fuck ourselves?
Nani?
Yeah, no, there's some wild shit going on with Iran right now.
Yeah,
Honestly,
I think
I just would like to add, if there's one thing I like to think of myself as an expert on, it's the Iranians. And I will say that Iran, for a while now, has been kind of sort of consciously and unconsciously moving itself away from political Islam. And the Gen Z Iranians themselves, like Iranians in their 20s, they're more moderate, laid-back, social conservative Democrats or very moderate style liberals. I don't mean the globalist woke liberals. I mean actual true classical liberalism, like 1980
they're Republicans. They're Republicans.
Yeah, the Republicans. That's the right way of looking at it.
They're little R Republicans. Like
yeah,
that's what they are.
And because all these new Iranians, these new Iranian, in their 20s and in 30s or whatever, are now going into the military and police as well and all sort of stuff, even though the laws still exist, like, oh, in the name of Allah, you can't show your hair as a woman, guess what? The 20-year-old cop isn't going to enforce that because in the closet he thinks it's fucking gay. And a lot of Iranians aren't focused on, oh, well, we need to raid this house because they're doing a bunch of alcohol and everything. The 20-year-old cops aren't going to give a crap. If anything, you're going to walk in, but not to destroy the party and arrest everyone for drinking alcohol, but more likely to join in the party and get all lit up and everything, because there are a bunch of guys in their 20s who don't really like the radical Islamist stuff. And a lot of Iranians are actually into Christianity.
No, have you seen the videos? Like, I'm going to throw some shade at the Israelis right now. Because the Israelis, they love showing the videos of the what's the purity police? What's their actual name? I forget what their actual name is.
The morality police.
No, not the morality. The morality police is what we call them. There's an actual name for them, and I just don't fucking remember it.
Hold on, I'll just look it up real quick.
Yeah, please do. But the thing about the morality police,
they're called the Guidance Patrol.
Guidance Patrol, thank you. The Guidance Patrol, the Israelis love showing the videos of the Guidance Patrol beating the shit out of people. What they don't like showing are the videos of the cops, like the normal Iranian cops in the local areas, literally walking up to the Guidance Police as they're harassing people, being like, yo, get the fuck out of here. Go.
That's nice. That's epic.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're...
Well, yeah, I think the Iranians in the future are going to have a coup or soft reform or whatever in the future, because the only people who are upholding the Islamic State are the small handful of hardcore supporters.
It's the IRGC.
They're being quickly bred out. Like, and the Iranians have. Do you know the Iranians had a population boom? Like, the Iranians are breeding like fucking rabbits right now. So you have a bunch of Iranians in their 20s right now. The older guys are dying out, and even some of the older guys are actually becoming more moderate because over the years, some of them have even calmed down a little bit. And like, maybe having Islamic theocracy was kind of cringe. And most Iranians have a more today. They're like, hey, we don't like the Americans. They're a bunch of imperialist assholes, and fuck the European cucks as well. But damn it, we don't like our monarch. We don't really like our Islamic Republic either. That's cringe. In fact, there was actually a very awesome video I watched where these Iranians were chanting, down with American imperialism and down with Khomeini, as they basically said, yeah, we're not American puppets, But we're not really puppets to the Islamists either. We want both of you assholes to stop screwing us. I'm just like, ooh, that's fucking epic.
Well, and that's the point. Is that's why this is a good signal. And Mitch, thank you for bringing it up. This is a good signal of things to come, because if the U.S. and the Russians and the Iranians sit down at a table, they can knock so much shit out. It's unfucking real.
Yeah.
Because here's
you basically end up cucking Israel to where they don't have an excuse for trying to start a regional frigging war.
Well, but also, and I will point this out, the Zionists, I tell this to everybody. They're, one word, two flavors. Again, I should probably start that video series. But there's two flavors to the word Zionism. You have the Zionists in Israel, and you have the Zionists in the UK.
So basically, Zionism is like pudding.
Yes. It's you can call it that.
I think I have episode. I think I have a title for that episode when we do it.
But you have the Zionists in Israel that they believe that because the Islamists continuously wage a holy war against them, that they have to wage a holy war back. And then there's the whole, Israel is for the Jews, and Israel is this, and Israel is that, so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada. Which, oh, by the way, fucking the amount of shit I got thrown at me for declaring that, no, I personally speaking, like, I want the Christians to have the Holy Land. That, oh, man, that was a great time. But then you have the Zionists in the UK, which they literally only claim to be Zionists to provide political cover for their shitty behavior. Like, for example, somebody known as Larry Fink. Which, oh, by the way, Larry Fink is currently tucking tail and bending over backwards to make Daddy Don happy because Daddy Don threatened to fucking take his company. So, oh, by the way, did you guys hear about, BlackRock buying the Panama Canal, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not ideal in my book, but still preferable to the Chinese owning it.
Well, yes, but here's the point. Larry Fink, who is, again, he's a British Zionist, he bent over backwards and is bending over backwards to keep in the good graces of Trump right now, because basically all that stands between Larry Fink and him losing his company is Trump telling Jamie Dimon, buy it. It's the only thing. It's the only fucking thing. And I still think that even if even if Larry Fink does everything that he's told, Trump might just tell Jamie Dimon to fucking buy the company anyways. So, there's some distinct possibilities. But this whole Zionist thing, the problem is that, again, Israel doesn't have the capability. And the only reason why they believe they have the capability is because they have so many Zionists in the UK telling them that they can do it. But what they don't realize, the Israelis, is the reason why their Supreme Court is a bunch of fuckheads is because the Supreme Court of Israel is literally chosen almost verbatim by the British. That Supreme Court is completely and utterly influenced by MI6 and the British government. And they don't realize it. They continuously talk about, the Russians and the this, that, and the other, and they love bitching about Qatar, and I'm like, okay, yeah, Qatar is a piece of shit, but, oh, by the way, Qatar is a fucking client of the British, too. Like, come on. Like, fucking see the forest for the trees, motherfuckers. No, I tell the Israelis this all the time when we get into the discussion. I'm like, I don't want to see you guys commit you know, fucking mass suicide. Like I would prefer that not be a thing. But if you want to commit mass suicide, then go the fuck ahead. I don't care at this point.
Let's see. What if my calculations are right, we're coming up on an hour 45 right now.
Let me
Yeah.
take a look. Exactly an hour 45. So your calculations are
Yeah,
precise.
Good job. Good job, Mitch. And I think we've, like, the only regions that we really haven't covered are the Arctic, South America, and Africa. Do you guys want me to go over those real fucking quick just for shits and gigs?
Sure.
Because Africa is one big shit and giggle. Heyo.
Okay, so we'll start with Africa because it's actually the easiest to go over. Basically, you have a situation where Africa, they revolted against the French. The British and the French are losing their influence in the region hardcore. The Americans are slowly but surely regaining their position in Africa, and at this point in time, Africa is just going to be what it is. Now, the key thing with Africa is Algeria and Morocco. Does Morocco stay with the United States, which it looks like it is, and does Algeria finally drop the French completely? Those are the two big ones in North Africa that we need to keep an eye on, basically. South America it's a whole clusterfuck. Basically, the only country worth talking about in South America, my bad, in South America is actually Chile. Because Chile right now looks like they're about to fully align with the United States, which then puts Argentina in a really weird position, because as we start signing agreements and mineral deals and whatnot with Chile, Argentina is going to want to get in on that action.
Yeah.
But then again, Argentina just transferred half of their gold reserves to the city of London, and I bet you Javier Milei is fucking regretting that decision right now so hard it's unfucking real.
Yeah. Well, Trump did say just a couple of days ago he was planning to do a free trade agreement with Argentina.
Okay, so okay. Well, I missed that, so thank you for bringing that up. And then you've got the situation with Brazil, Lula being Lula, and if I remember correctly, wasn't he just hospitalized recently? Because he's got what does he have, like a triple bypass, and it almost killed him or something like that. I don't remember. If I remember correctly, it was a heart condition. It was something to do with a bypass. I just don't remember the exact details.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. I kind of bypassed all the Brazil news myself.
Yeah, Lula, isn't he the
He's the commie.
Lex Luthor? Isn't he the Lex Luthor wannabe?
No, you're thinking of the Supreme Court Justice of Brazil. Lula is just the president. It's the head of the Supreme Court who's the most nefarious figure there.
Now, then you've got northern South Africa, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, all that shit. It's as it's been for the past 20, 30 years. Now, there's a good chance that Maduro is going to be kind of a weak point for the United States, because the Europeans could probably try to exploit that and get Maduro as an ally. So Venezuela could fall within the Europeans' sphere of influence. We'll have to see. And then moving on to the Arctic, and I guess the Antarctic kind of as well, but the Arctic is more important. The Arctic, if the United States and the Russians can get an agreement and can start cooperating, the Arctic is basically ours. There's nobody whatsoever that can really challenge us. Again, the Europeans, they're going to try to retain control Canada. But if Canada starts fracturing, like I believe it will, then at that point in time, basically what's going to happen is Alberta, Saskatchewan secede, and then all of a sudden we say, "Hey, Northwest Territories, Yukon, come on down. Let's have a party." And then all of a sudden we have a land bridge from Alaska to the United States, and shit, that's going to be a fucking wild time. And then at that point in time, the Europeans are fucked. Like they lose the majority of the hydrocarbons of Canada, and then we also can build a really nice pipeline from Alaska to the U.S. Which then at that point in time, drill baby drill, drill baby drill does not encapsulate what the fuck will happen at that point in time.
Yeah, Keystone Pipeline Part 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Keystone XL, fucking extra long.
Oh, it's American, so it's gonna go from being XL to being XXXL.
Don't you mean XXXXXXXXL?
Yes. Similar to the American waistline.
Actually, I was thinking of something. Actually, I was thinking of something else, but
Of course, you were thinking of that.
Yeah, or as Trump would say, it'll be the biggest, most beautiful pipeline ever.
It's gonna be huge. It's gonna be beautiful.
gonna be laying more pipe than Molly.
Unfortunate.
I wasn't expecting that.
Or it's Stoner. You really didn't assume he was gonna insert some sort of horny joke?
Yeah, I
At
should
a
have
friend's expense.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's where we should tie this one up. I think we basically covered everything. Anything of note that is going on otherwise, like it's all part of the larger game. You know,
just before we go,
my shot.
I'm just curious. So, what do you think of that whole free trade agreement between America and Argentina? Does that change anything in your view?
It just solidifies so it solidifies one thing, that Javier Milei probably isn't aligned with the EU. Mm-hmm. Because Javier Milei is kind of the wild card in South America. Mm-hmm. Because Javier Milei, we don't know who he is, what he's about, what his intentions are, what's his agenda. And him transferring the gold to the City of London was like a big, ooh, shit, he might actually be a Europhile. But now, with a free trade agreement with the U.S., plus the context of the City of London failing to deliver on gold, or getting ready to fail delivering on gold, that could actually provide the impetus to say, okay, Javier Milei, he got asked to do something, he did it, and now he's regretting it, because now half of Argentina's gold reserves are tied up in the mess that is the UK. Mm-hmm. So that's the extent I'll say on him for right now.
Fair enough. So yeah, seems like a reasonable place to end it. Goodbye, everyone. See you next week.
Ciao.
Adios, mi amigos.
And good night.